In our lesson on paragraphs, we talked about how the browser automatically formats a paragraph, taking multiple occurrences of white space, spaces, new lines, etc., and folds them into one space for the purpose of formatting the paragraph. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to control the line breaks in the browser. Here in our editor on the top of the screen, we have a couple of paragraphs, and we're displaying those paragraphs in the browser on the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and shrink the browser down so that the paragraphs wrap a little bit for the purposes of this lesson, so we can show how to control those wraps. You'll notice that the first paragraph up here extends past the editor window with no wraps whatsoever. And you'll notice that down in the browser it wraps normally. And you'll notice that the second paragraph is wrapped normally on the screen, and it wraps normally down here in the browser as well. So this first paragraph goes beyond the editor window, and if we break it someplace, let's break it over here and save it. Of course, this does not affect how it's rendered in the browser whatsoever. So how do we actually get a line to break where we intend it to? For this purpose, we use the BR tag, BR, and it's a standalone tag. It does not have any content, and so we use this shortcut notation here to satisfy XHTML's need for a beginning and an end tag. And if we save this and reload it in the browser, you'll notice that the paragraph breaks there. And yet the paragraph is still formatted as a paragraph. In other words, it's got extra space between the two paragraphs, and this is normal behavior for block elements in a browser window. Now, we'll go ahead and take that out and the paragraph back the way that it was and save, reload in the browser so we can see that that intentional line break is done. Now, how do we get a line break to not happen? You'll notice that between the word notice and how over here, that there's a line break that's happened because the browser decided that it needs to wrap there in order to make it into a paragraph. What if we want it to not wrap there? If I go ahead and put in a non-breaking space here, this is a special character entity called non-breaking space, then this will prevent a break between these two words, and these two words will be on one line, so they'll get wrapped down to the next line. Before we save this and look at how it works, let's talk about the character entity here. You'll notice it has an ampersand at the beginning and a semicolon at the end, and in between the ampersand and the semicolon we have the letters NBSP. This is how you use a character entity in HTML and XHTML. The ampersand denotes the beginning of the character entity, the semicolon is the end of it, and in between you have the designation of the character entity. In this case it's a named entity, and it's named NBSP, which stands for non-breaking space. So we'll go ahead and save this and reload the browser, and you'll see that now the paragraph does not wrap between the words notice and how. It doesn't break there. It only breaks before it or after it, and so it takes the whole thing, because it won't fit here, and puts it on the next line. And that's how a non-breaking space works in HTML. In fact, if you wanted this paragraph to not wrap at all, you could select the entire line, and I'm just going to select it from here to the end, not include that space beforehand, and use the editor's search and replace feature to replace the space. The editor fills in whatever you have selected when you do that, and replace all the spaces with non-breaking space entities. Replace all in selection, 26 occurrences, close, and I'll go ahead and save and reload in the browser, and we see now that that paragraph doesn't break at all. It goes all the way across, and you have to scroll sideways in order to see the entire paragraph. Puts it all on one line. And that's because there aren't any spaces that it can break in. All the spaces in the paragraph are non-breaking spaces. I'm going to undo this and go ahead and replace this element here with a space, the character entity, non-breaking space entity. Save and reload in the browser, and we see that our paragraph is now back to normal. There is another way that we can force this paragraph to not break, and this is a non-standard element. It is not in the standard, and it tends to work in most of the browsers that I've seen, including Internet Explorer and Firefox and all the popular browsers, but it's not in any of the standards, so it's an unsupported rogue non-standard element. And it's called NoBreak, and it's spelled N-O-B-R. I'll go ahead and insert it there and at the end of the line. And so everything between those begin and end tag will not break. And so I'm going to save that and reload in the browser, and you'll see we now have a non-breaking paragraph. So this is a shortcut for making a non-breaking paragraph should you actually want one and you don't feel like search and replace all the spaces in the paragraph. It is not supported. It's not part of the standard. It's just one of those elements that's cropped up out of a necessity, but was never made a part of the standard. So you can use that if you want to, and it'll work in most browsers, but just know that it's not part of the standard. So this is how you control the line breaks in a paragraph. You can use the BR element to insert a line break where you want it, and you can use the NBSP character entity to prevent line breaks where you don't want them, and you can use the unsupported, non-standard, no break tag to prevent line breaks for a block of text.